I was thinking yesterday how by only projecting positive messages out into the social media world or YouTube world or what have you world, it could be indirectly a form of violence in a way because it's
Yeah.
not telling the whole story.
Wow, I like that idea. Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So you think you're like, oh, I'm like an inspirational guy. It's like, well, there is something to being honest with where you're at and letting people actually be actually along with you on the journey and acknowledging that like I don't actually always feel this way that I project out into the social medias each day.
hmm
It's kind of a weird thing that we feel this.
Yeah, there's like this selection bias with what we post on social media. We tend to only post ourselves when we look great,
Yeah.
when the lighting is perfect, when we're feeling super psyched about life, and I think it leads to this very skewed image, and I think that can do a type of subtle harm to people's mental health.
Well, it forces people to feel like they always have to kind of have like a costume on of sorts. Like that's something that throws me off. I'll go out of my way oftentimes to tell people that I feel shitty, or I feel like, oh man, I slept in too late, and then just going through the perils of my day,
Yeah.
just to get out of the common orientation of like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm great, man, best day ever. Oh, everything's just great.
I really like your social media persona. I feel like whenever I look at your stories, it's like this close up of the beard. It's like you don't really go out of your way to find like a super flattering angle. Not that you don't look handsome,
How
like
dare
on
you?
those, in your stories you do. You're a handsome man, but you'd have to like work to find an unflattering image. But I feel like you just don't care. It doesn't seem like you care all that much.
No, that's not
And
true.
I care. Even I care.
I'm learning how to unwind the care.
You are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in process.
Me too.
Yeah.
I posted an image of myself from the bookstore yesterday, showing. It was the first time I got to see my book in a bookstore, and I saw yours too. Actually, we were in the bookstore, and my brother pointed out your book. He was like, "Oh, that's that guy."
Oh, that's great.
I was like, "Yeah, it's my
I
homie."
look like I'm 13 years old on the cover.
13, like a really jacked
Like
13-year-old.
mid-adolescence.
A 13-year-old that went through precocious puberty
Yeah.
and is probably taking anabolic steroids.
I think that's the vibe.
Yeah, that's the vibe.
That's the vibe.
Your publisher that's what they were going
What was
for.
your experience doing the book during the crisis? I've been asking people how are your crises?
It was weird. It was weird launching the book at that time because my book came out literally the week that it seems like everything kind of shut down, and there was this culmination of fear and uncertainty. Now I think people are still afraid of the coronavirus, but there's a lot less. I think we're a little bit more informed about its kinetics and how it travels and things like that. But at the beginning, it was it was like, what is this thing? It was just there were so many question marks, and so it kind of. I just remember putting the book out. Some of the press that I had done got preempted by like Trump, press conferences and things like that, and so that was kind of a bummer. I mean, I obviously, was going through the motions with this thing like everybody else was, but you work really hard. Oh, and then you end up posting about a book, like a project that you've worked really hard on for years, and people are like, idiots on the internet are like, this isn't the time, Max.
Like, no, bitch, I've been playing this for 2 years.
Exactly.
It's the time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is coming out it's like a baby. It's like it's coming out whether you fucking want it to or not. And so I think that I was able to walk that tightrope well. And so the book came out. It did as well as I had hoped for it to do, and I'm super proud of it. But yesterday, or a couple days ago, was the first time I got to see it in a bookstore because bookstores have been shuttered since it came out.
Yeah, I still haven't seen mine. I've been experiencing a somewhat of like a deep-ish reevaluation of what matters or what is actually meaningful in my life. And so I've found these crises. Now we're two. We're
Yeah.
anticipating the third could be
What's that going to be?
I don't know.
Aliens.
deeper financial crisis, aliens,
Oh, yeah.
or technological virus.
Huh. Yeah.
That would be a big one.
It's what a year it's been so far.
Yeah.
But I feel like the silver lining is that now I feel like as a society we're almost ready for anything. I mean, we've gone through a lot collectively.
I don't know. I feel like the coronavirus felt like an American crisis. Felt like it was like a nerf crisis. Didn't feel it's still. I don't think we've like really felt.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of imaginary money being infused into the system that creates like a temporary balm.
Yeah.
So I still feel like I was looking into the impact of unemployment and the impact that has on suicides and deaths in general. And it was, have you heard this? It's for every 1% increase annually is a 37,000 increase in death via suicide, via correlated to depression, domestic violence, something like that. And now the unemployment is at, what is it, 20% or something astronomical?
Yeah.
I mean, now it's starting to shift because things are starting to turn on, but it's very strange.
Yeah. But it's I think what to me has kind of kept my sense of optimism afloat is the fact that once the fear and uncertainty around the virus kind of is mitigated, then wouldn't the economy just snap back to the way that it was prior to the pandemic? Like once things open up again, it's not like, I mean, there's going to be a slow reopening, but I mean, people are wanting to go out to restaurants again. People are wanting, I think, to return to see live comedy and concerts and things like that. So to me, I feel like, the unemployment thing was real, but wouldn't it just snap back to the way that it was?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm waiting to see. I mean, people are still. I feel like we've been almost habituated to be kind of afraid of each other. So we've kind of like cultivating this society of agoraphobes.
So you feel like attendance at events and movie theaters and comedy clubs are going to be kind of permanently depressed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there is a demographic of people that are still like staunch, I'm afraid of this.
Yeah.
Which, more power to them. I don't know what the right decision is. I definitely lean on the side of like lean on your immune system and you have the ability to deal with viruses.
I have a lot of musician friends, and the music industry has been, just over the past couple of decades really, it's been transformed by technology in the way that most like independent artists these days make a living is by touring. And so I really feel for the artists out there, especially the musicians, because when is the next time they're going to be able to like go on tour?
Yeah,
that's another big sort of wild card.
People need purpose and they need each other. And that's like another. I've just been going into all these unnecessary statistics. There's a Mark Twain quote. There's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. So I'm always kind of like precautious of regurgitating all the different things.
Yeah.
But surveys show that 3 out of 5 Americans report feeling lonely, which perhaps that's like a fine thing. Maybe
3 out of 4.
Is it 3 out of 4 now?
No, wait. Is that what you said?
I saw 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5.
I saw some NPR thing that said 3 out of 5.
Wow.
But I mean, whatever. I think it depends on, and then also it's like, who the hell is taking surveys? Like, I haven't taken a survey, ever.
Same.
So there's those numbers are obviously skewed. But I wonder what. So there's the financial impact on our health, but then there's the distancing impact. And so before Corona, there was this 3 out of 5, 3 out of 4, whatever, a really high percentage of people reporting to be like, I feel really lonely in my life.
Yeah.
And now there's state mandated loneliness, which is just like, whoa.
It's messed up. It's messed up. I just before like this all went down, I met a girl, and it like, without projecting too far into what like the relationship could have been, it was like we were unable to like hang out, grab a drink, go on a date or anything like that because of this whole coronavirus thing. Her friends wouldn't let her venture outside of like the immediate circle, with whom they were quarantining. And I felt I felt conflicted about it because I thought that it's so difficult to meet people in general these days, without being in the middle of a pandemic, that if you meet somebody that you feel like you connect with, that you should be willing to take that risk. And maybe that's just me, but I felt like kind of bummed about the fact that she wouldn't she didn't want to hang out, even though seemingly there was like some kind of interesting vibe between us. But at the end of the day, I've been pretty lucky to spend the time quarantining with my family, who now, my entire family pretty much lives in LA, and my dad is he's now 70 and he's a smoker,
Hmm.
if you'll imagine that, and so he's, I guess, pretty high risk, and so it's made me kind of like think a little bit more carefully about the risks that I'm willing to take. But yeah, people definitely have been feeling, I think, alienated from one another, and what do people do when they feel isolated? They turn to social media, and social media these days has been so inflamed. I mean, even before the Black Lives Matter movement, social media, which we were talking about as soon as we started rolling, presents this very weird portrait of a person, and so I think it really is a recipe for feeling lonely, but even worse, just for poor mental health.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the reasons I've been, looking at all, viewpoints from both sides of the aisle, from all different, types of people about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think one thing that seems to be true about it is that the timing of it really, the fact that like so many people lost their jobs, people were feeling isolated and alienated and disconnected from one another. And then this awful thing happens with George Floyd. It basically was like what's it called? What's that like really easily flammable part of like when you're starting a campfire? It's like kindling, Tinder. Yeah, it's like it was like the Tinder for a fire, and then just everything blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were like a tinder box of sorts, where we were this pressure chamber that was in dire need of decompression, and so it really was a perfect storm, in a lot of different ways. I wonder, how does the Genius Life, the book, how does that relate? How have you found overlaying your work into providing meaning in the world today? Because that's something that I for a moment was just like, fuck everything I'm doing. I don't even think it even matters. Like, well, I'm just going to go mulch the land and move rocks and go to Oregon and shoot guns, and like, I'm going to just step away, because who cares about their hips and my stretchy bands? Who cares?
Aaron, I care. Every time I hang with you, I feel like I learn something that helps me feel better in my body, which I'm always grateful for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my book really is the Genius Life I wrote to help people really regain metabolic health. And just before, or just as it came out, this whole pandemic thing occurred, and what we've learned is that one of the key determinants as to whether or not a person is going to suffer from morbidity or, God forbid, mortality from the virus is really, like, the linchpin seems to be whether or not a person is in good metabolic health. And unfortunately today, that award is given to the few. Like 12% of people in this country achieve what clinicians would call good metabolic health.
Isn't obesity 60% in America presently?
Yeah, by the year 2030, 1 in 2 people are going to be obese, and 1 in 4 are going to be morbidly obese.
Oh. So it's not 60% now.
It is 60%. Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, 66% of people today are either overweight or obese.
Oh, yeah.
So obesity is different from being overweight.
Yeah.
Many people are overweight.
Yeah.
But yeah, so within that 66%, you've got people that are just mildly
So
over.
there's still a third of people that aren't considered overweight in America.
Well, they're normal weight. But you can actually still, about 20% of normal weight people are normal weight metabolically obese. So they're normal weight, but you look under the hood and they're in pretty poor metabolic health.
Yeah.
And in tandem with that, about 20% of overweight people are in good metabolic health.
Yeah.
So that's why, your weight is a pretty good surrogate marker for your metabolic health. Like, it correlates pretty tightly to how you're doing, on the inside. But it's imperfect. So that's why I think just eating a healthy diet, regardless of how good you look in the mirror, is important. That's why sometimes you see athletes that have like amazing bodies, but then internally, they're suffering from insulin resistance and things like that.
Yeah.
And then also youth, I think, is a pretty good shield. A lot of people, they look good and they eat a lot of junk, but that catches up to you in the long run.
Yeah.
Just looking good in the mirror is not necessarily like a insurance that you're healthy.
Why was obesity such a factor, or is obesity such a factor with susceptibility or vulnerability to coronavirus? Is it a metabolic thing, or is it a obesity itself thing? Are those separate? Are those the same?
I think what it implies is that you have high baseline levels of inflammation. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, they're both associated with elevated levels of inflammation, which is basically an immune system that's been activated. And I think the riskiest thing about the coronavirus, what happens, it's called a cytokine storm. And it's just, your body just, your immune system panics and it damages the lungs, cardiac tissue. I think now there's evidence that it's a vascular, it can be, it may be a vascular virus as well that affects your vasculature. So yeah, I mean, it's, when you're inflamed, your immune system is already working in sort of overdrive.
Yep.
And inflammation is not a bad thing. I mean, you've talked about this, I'm sure, many times on your podcast. Inflammation is really designed by nature to spot clean. Cuts, wounds, scrapes. If you sprain your ankle, if you cut your finger, it's there to basically rush fresh blood, immune cells to the area to make sure that, that small scrape or bruise or whatever won't end up killing you. Today, our immune systems are responding not so much to those kinds of acute and localized threats, but to what we're eating and how we're living. So, as opposed to in the past, inflammation would be used by our bodies locally and acutely. Now it's systemic and it's global.
Yeah.
And, then you throw this virus into the mix and it just seems to be like the perfect storm.
And then the reaction to the virus being one that would induce greater amounts of things like depression and loneliness and all that, which then circles back to being correlated to greater amounts of inflammation.
Yeah. It becomes like a vicious cycle.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really bad. And then, Paul Saladino has been sort of like talking about this a lot on social media. He's a medical doctor who actually did his residency in psychiatry. So I think, he offers a pretty unique perspective. But the fact that, we've been told to the whole quarantine thing, stay out, stay inside, basically. I mean, your average person today already spends 93% of their time inside. It's one of the reasons why we're all so, deficient in vitamin D, close proximity to our kitchens, to our refrigerators, to, ultra-processed junk foods. We're being told to buy shelf-stable foods, or at least we were initially, foods that are that aren't necessarily going to go bad too quickly. We're keeping out of the sun. Even the term social distancing, I had a problem with since day one. I mean, really what I think we should be doing, in as we await further clarity about how the virus spreads is physical distancing. But why should we social distance?
Right.
Social distance to me implies that we can't still find ways to be connected to, our friends and our loved ones. So I think, it really has created a perfect storm. But, it seems to be, the virus seems to be a lot less. I mean, granted, a lot of people have died, and it has been a big tragedy so far. So I don't want to diminish that, but it seems to be a lot less dangerous than I think we initially thought that it was.
I wonder if if one can change the dynamics of their relationships based off of the type of nutrition that they put into their face. So if it's like so we have this stressful experience that increases inflammation and kind of has similar effects as, depression would, or eating certain inflammatory foods would. And so that then creates this nasty feedback loop that you're talking about. Can one start to reverse that feedback loop and use nutrition as a lever to start to kind of span out into other parts of their life?
Yeah, I think so. When you're inflamed, you basically, like any animal, you exhibit what zoologists refer to as sickness behaviors. And these behaviors are designed to basically isolate you from the herd, prevent spreading of whatever pathogen you might be, under the assault from. It's designed to reserve these behaviors are designed to reserve energy for healing, and it's actually been postulated that major depression is an extreme form of sickness behavior. And so if we're inflamed due to what we're eating, and it's causing us to have all these subconscious drives, to like distance ourselves from our social groups, then yeah, the other side of that coin is that you could eat and live in a way that's going to reduce inflammation, keep you robust, virile, healthy, and that's going to support, being socially active. Also making sure that you're getting adequate sleep. Matthew Walker, who's
Yeah.
have you had him on your podcast?
Not yet. I'd love to reach out to him. Do you know him?
I don't know him, but I know his research, and he actually published a study, a very interesting study that found that sleep deprivation actually acts like a social repellent. So when people are sleep deprived, they actually not only are they less inclined to want to socialize, but they actually make people less attracted to you. It actually makes like being wearing sleep deprivation on your face somehow sends like a subliminal message to others to kind of keep their distance.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a study that I talk about in the new book, The Genius Life, because I go into ways of optimizing your sleep. And so that's important. But yeah, minimizing, like eating in a way that is not inflaming your body, making sure that you're getting adequate sleep. Even altruism falls under a domain of a cognitive domain called executive function. So like our ability to be altruistic and to think about others empathetically in a way that isn't just about serving our own immediate needs for survival. That's like, making sure that we're well nourished, well fed, that we're, exercising, that we're taking care of our bodies, basically then allows us the space to, I think, then be altruistic and to project empathy and to care about others, in the world. So I think it's all intricately related.
Damn.
Yeah.
So we naturally, it's innate in our genetics to naturally social distance when we're expressing sickness behavior.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is that because we're a larger organism and we want to take care of the grander organism?
I mean, most organisms will do this. Like if you've ever had a sick pet, if you've ever been sick yourself, you notice that like, you tend not to think about sex. You don't really have a huge appetite. Grooming and things like that become less of a priority. Animals, zoo animals display the same behaviors. If you've ever had a sick pet, they do the same thing. Like if you have a cat, they won't groom themselves as much. So what that basically tells you is that your immune system, in a way that is completely subconscious, changes your behavior, and it changes your sort of hierarchy of like the things you prioritize in your life. So
that's why sometimes to knock the rust off, you'll sleep with whoever.
Maybe. Yeah.
If a person's in like, it's like, man, I've been expressing sickness behavior for 9 months. Like I've just been alone. I haven't shaved my anything.
You can also, it also kind of gives you a way to subjectively get a sense of whether or not you're healthy. So it's like the 3 H's, if you're happy, if you're hungry, if you're horny, chances are you're doing pretty well internally. But if you're depressed, if you don't have a sex drive, and if you are not, if you lose your appetite, there's probably something going on.
How does a person increase their sex drive via food?
That's a good question. I mean, there are ways that you can support, or
via anything.
Yeah, you can support like your hormones with food, with diet. You can support testosterone production. Testosterone is also important for women. I mean, they have about a tenth of what we have as men, but it's important for well-being. It's important for body composition. It's important for sex drive. Just making sure that you're nutritionally replete. About 90% of people are deficient today in at least one essential nutrient. When there's this idea that when you have nutrient deficiencies, what is available in the body is going to be funneled basically into processes that are required for immediate survival as opposed to like long-term health.
Yeah.
And procreation is one of those things that like it guarantees the survival of the species, but not necessarily the survival of the individual.
Hmm.
And so making sure that you don't have any like major nutrient deficiencies, I think is important.
Hmm.
Um,
What are ones that stand out with people?
I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of diet you're eating. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, there are certain nutrient deficiencies that, like I think zinc, vitamin B12, I guess is the obvious one. Iron. Yeah, there's like a range. Creatine is not an essential nutrient, but I think that if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you should probably supplement with creatine, for mental and cognitive health.
Yeah.
What else is there? Choline is super important. It's not essential. It's conditionally essential, but about 90% of people don't consume adequate choline, which is important for healthy, brain tissue, cognitive function. It's a methyl donor, so it's important for detox and DNA production and DNA expression and things like that. Omega 3s, I think, are super important. Most people, consume pretty low amounts of preformed omega 3s every day. Yeah, I mean, there's people. It depends on kind of like who you are, but the fact that the modern food supply today has become saturated with ultra processed foods that are, for the most part, nutritionally, they've been wrung free of like an ultra processed food generally is like pretty nutrient deficient.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of foods that most of us are kind of basing our diets around. And so that's one of the reasons why I think so many of us are deficient in these nutrients. We live in a world today that has led to many of us being overfed but undernourished.
Yeah, I've heard kind of a similar analogy from Jack White, White Stripes guy, and he was referring to analog music being like that's like the whole, you're getting the whole sound. And then when you cut over to digital music, you're getting a copy that's all bitted out to be able to fit into this little piece of information.
Interesting.
And so it's kind of like what he suggested is that by listening to that bitted out isn't the right term, but that that copy of the sound. Because do you know the way that digital music works? I feel like you've explained this to me before. I wouldn't be able to explain it well enough. But it's like it's cut into like thousands of little bits and then repieced back together essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like when you're recording live music, you're probably getting frequencies that you can't even hear, but they're being recorded.
Yeah.
And so they're just there. And then when you're doing a digital reproduction, you're probably just like using, I don't know the exact terminology, but it's probably like a high pass and a low pass filter. You're probably just like skimming off the top. You're skimming off the high end and the low end of what you reasonably would expect humans to not necessarily be paying that much attention to.
Right.
And so you're getting just this like really kind of narrow frequency. And then also there's like the artifacts of compression. So like today, the vast majority of music that we listen to has been compressed. I mean, the question is like, is it audibly different in the practical
what
sense?
he would suggest is on face value, the apple just looks like an apple.
Yeah.
The chicken just looks like a chicken. And the sound just sounds like a song.
Yeah.
But in fact, it actually leaves from what he suggested, which I think he was just, high and talking about things or whatever, which I think is great. But it leaves the listener feeling tired.
Interesting.
Wow. Because now you have to fill in that extra space.
Wow.
Whereas when you get the whole food version of the sound, you actually go to a live music show.
Yeah.
You actually have a conversation with somebody. You actually have sex with somebody instead of looking at a screen while you're wanking yourself. When you get to have that full experience, your body says, oh, okay, cool, I can fill in all the nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
But when you're always living this supplement-based life, this copy version, then it's like it seems on the front, it's like a cheap, shitty house in like one of those like box neighborhoods. They just like throw it up. It's not like a fucking castle.
Yeah.
It's like we laid each brick by brick, like nature did this.
It's like a Whole Food house.
It's a Whole Food house.
Wow. Have you had Jack White on your podcast?
I want to.
Oh, man.
No.
That's cool.
Jack White's great.
I have my own podcast. It's called The Genius Life. You've been on it. You've been on it 3 times, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know why you keep letting me back.
Dude, I love it. You're one of my favorite guests. I think that you offer a ton of value. I just love the way that you're such a good speaker. But my goal with the podcast, even though it's in the health and wellness and fitness vertical, like I definitely want, and I've been priming the pump. I've been having like a greater range of like, guests on it. Ultimately, I want to have my favorite musicians on it, my favorite comedians on it.
Yeah, you want to diversify because all that's health.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking last night of music. It's like you're literally casting spells on people. Our video person's playing with the cat in the background.
Yeah,
it's very sweet.
My
Max
cat,
and Max.
so cute.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, her name is Delilah.
Delilah. What a great... I stepped on Delilah before we started this.
It's okay.
It was pretty awesome. That's the worst. You walk into somebody's house and step on their animal.
That's the most
That's
action
not
she's
a good...
gotten all day. She's just like it's novelty.
What was I talking about? I was excited before I got
Oh, musicians. It's part of
Oh,
health.
it's freaking health, man.
Yeah.
We get all wrapped up in vitamin this and mineral that and all that stuff, but then it's like, like just music. Like you just getting a kazoo, a drum, a flute, anything, and starting to, there's all the obvious, like we break everything down in these isolated Western mechanics perspectives. It's like, well, when you're breathing into the flute, that exhalation is stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system and toning the vagus nerve. And, it's like the people that are the healthiest people, I think, don't realize they're healthy. They just happen to be traveling through life in such a way that they don't do those sickness behaviors.
Yeah.
But I think music is one of those things where it's like it is a vital nutrient. I think touch is one of those things where there's endless mountains of research that indicate that it literally responds to your body like a nutrient.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the food conversation, and I might just be having flashbacks, but I think that the food conversation is much bigger than just food.
Yeah.
Nutrition.
Yeah, I have one of my good friends is he's a musician. His name is Matt Nathanson, and we talk about this analogy all the time. We talk about how news and information can be, you can have a diet. We literally will use the term diet. You can have a junk food sort of news and information diet, or you can have like a whole food and a nutritious news and information diet. And I think the same thing applies to music. You can have like, there's like whole food music and there's junk food music.
We need some records up in here.
Yeah.
Damn.
I was actually looking yesterday on like a record player to get because, I feel like that would be a cool thing.
I think it all comes back to that. I think that's something that this time, and something that I've heard is like all the thing. I heard Robert Kiyosaki say this in this very ominous way. He's the guy that wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He said something along the lines of like, everything that is new will go, essentially. Like it will come back to the old. And he's referring to like gold and real estate and things like that. The things that are like, they've been here forever. Mm-hmm. They're going to stay. The world's, as we kind of lose our bearings in this kind of chaos, it'll come back to, once you push the dust away, it's like, where's the stone at?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an interesting thing with music. It's like if you become kind of, I don't know what the term is, agitated enough by all of the social media and all the buzzing and all the static and all the stuff, eventually I think you kind of, it's like a cycle of sorts. You kind of get through that, and then you eventually wind back to being the old guy on the porch. It's like, I'm going to get one of those record machines. It's like, what?
I totally see that. And especially also from a music production standpoint, I'm not sure if this is the case for music that's produced these days, but certainly music that was produced before a certain decade was produced to ultimately end up on analog and then would get transferred to these more digital platforms like CDs or digital music or what have you. But like if you're listening to, say, Nina Simone on Spotify, I'd be very interested to hear what her music would sound like coming off of vinyl.
Yeah.
because, music of that era was literally produced to end up on vinyl.
Yeah.
And so that would be the purest manifestation, I think, of that. But for music produced today, it's all being produced today with the producer knowing that the ultimate destination is going to be, one of these platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, what have you. And I'm not, I'm definitely not an expert in this, but I'm a musician, and so I've got a tiny bit of experience doing this, and it's just, it is super interesting.
You're not just a musician. You've got CDs and shit. You're like, this is like
Yeah.
a part of your history
Yeah.
/ present.
Yeah.
I don't think people know that.
People don't.
Max Lugavere, look him up.
Yeah. I've got, if you go to my, no, on my YouTube channel, I've got a bunch of.
Max doesn't like talking about it. He's very modest.
Well, because I think
he doesn't want to distract from his message, the purity of his message.
Yeah. Well, because I believe so. I'm very lucky in that I love what I do in the health and wellness space, and whether it's like my books or my Instagram content or my podcast, and I just wouldn't want. But back when I first got started, I thought that by doing music in tandem with that, it would take away from it would hurt my credibility as a.
Why do you think that? That sounds so crazy in my mind. Again, don't listen to me in any kind of business tutelage or social media, anything. But
because I think the problem lies in the human condition. People want to think of you in one way. They want to think of you as one. They want to think of you as a brand, the way that they think about Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever, And so I basically made the decision to kind of put the music on the back burner publicly. But it's something that I still do most days. In fact, the journey of becoming a better musician is one of the most gratifying things in my life. Because I started playing music terrible at it. I didn't grow up playing music. I picked up the guitar in my mid-20s, and I certainly was never a singer. I literally didn't know how to sing. Intellectually, I didn't what I told myself was that there are enough people in the world that sing that it can't be. It's not magic. There's got to be something. There's got to be a method, a teachable method to singing, to the act of singing. And so once I intellectually was able to figure out what it was, there's certainly, singing is an art, and so it's not all, you can't be too analytical about it, because the best singing moves you in a way that you can't sort of distill to technique necessarily. But I realized that if I could somehow learn the technique and just practice that and just learn the rules of singing, what it actually meant, and playing guitar and all that, that I would be able to ultimately one day do it. That it wasn't something that I was excluded from. It wasn't a club that I couldn't ultimately find my way into, And so I just dedicated myself to learning how to do it. I remember there was a series of years that every single day I was practicing for multiple hours a day, 2-3 hours every single day, singing, recording myself, sounding horrible, but just recording myself, listening back, listening back, making other people, friends of mine, suffer through my music so that they could give me, as honest feedback as they would on it. And over time I just got better and better and better. And but the coolest thing I think about music is that you're always getting better. I still to this day, I can listen to myself sing certain things and I'm like, wow, I really love my voice there. I love the tone of my voice there. I sound great. But then there are other things that I sing where I'm like, wow, that is going to take me some work,
Yeah.
And to me, aside from the musical journey, it has had this spillover effect into other areas of my life that I think is just, provides so much value. There's this crossover effect. And I actually talk about this in my new book, The Genius Life, in terms of physical stress, when we do certain things cold water immersion. It's funny being able to bring it all back to health, but cold water immersion, sauna therapy, high intensity interval training, when we become more adapted to those individual pursuits, there's what's called a cross adaptation effect occurs, where we become more resilient in other areas of our life, namely psychologically. That's why exercise is so great for our mental health, or why saunas and cold water immersion is so great for our mental health. But going back to music, the thing about music that's been so valuable, outside of the musical journey itself, is that it's taught me that really you can do whatever it is that you set your mind to. you might not be able to do everything, but you can do anything. Whatever it is that like that you want to do, if you just dedicate yourself to it, nothing is off limits. Because I was the least musical person ever, and now when I put clips of myself singing on YouTube or on Instagram, I'll get like 9 out of 10 people will be like, they love the way that I sound and they want more of it. There's always one asshole
in your social media that is like the Max Lugavere,
like the health,
Genius stuff,
like occasionally.
That's because people want you to be a human.
Yeah,
they like it.
Yeah, but then there's always that one asshole that's like,
there's always
who's a fan and they don't realize how powerful they're. Some people don't realize
they're just in pain.
They're
hurt.
Like,
they want to decompress.
They'll be like, don't quit your day job.
Yeah,
I'm like, all right.
Yeah, that person just sucks.
I'll be like, F you.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all right. What that person needs is a response of like, it's probably really hard in there. Or they don't need
in
to
their
hear
life.
that. But like what they need is like some form of compassion.
Yeah, 100%.
The people that are the shittiest need the most hugs. It's like a strange paradox.
Well, but the other thing is that I don't think that people ultimately really know how important words are, like I try to be very deliberate about like the words that I use, almost to a fault. Because if I if I'm not sure about something, or if I think there's that Don Miguel Ruiz book, like the 4 Agreements.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be impeccable with your word, and I realized like, you have like these moments in life that seem really insignificant, but then you remember them forever, and you wonder why you remember them forever, and you probably remember them for a reason. So there was this friend of mine who was like this struggling musician, and he like sang and he wrote songs, but his songs were like never great or whatever. And I remember one time I went to see him at play a show. And he did like a cover of, what was the cover that he did? Oh, it was Jeff Buckley's "Lover, You Should Have Come Over." He did like a cover of it, and it really wasn't like a great cover. And after the show, I remember saying something to him very similar to like when somebody will just like send me that DM saying, "Don't quit your day job." I was like, "Yeah, you kind of the set was great, but kind of butchered the Jeff Buckley cover or something like that." Because I didn't realize how strong my words are, especially for an artist. Artists are very, we tend to be sensitive about these kinds of things, right?
If you're promoting real shit.
Yeah.
If you're putting out like a mask of something, then it's fine. If you never really got started digging into something that's more truthful, more honest, then it doesn't hurt as much for someone to potentially question it.
Yeah.
But it's like the more that I think we can support and kind of massage out, create a place for people to feel comfortable being honest.
Mm-hmm.
The more likely you are to be able to express like the Romans called it your inner daemon. You hear that term? It's like your inner voice that speaks through, but it's like this. It's like deeper than who you think you are on social media and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that inner voice. But music acts as a really beautiful medium to be able to get out of the way of yourself and allow something really that feels very honest and deep to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also putting yourself up on like the chopping block, because it's like, oh, that was like deeper than just like my shirt choice or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, being an artist, it's like this. It's, and I can relate. Even though my work today is about science and nutrition, and there wouldn't seem to be, on the surface, any artistry about it, I do feel like an artist. And being an artist, like if you're feeling even like the slightest bit off, in terms of your confidence, it can like ruin your whole day. Like it's just like, it's a really precious thing. And so, yeah, I just think you got to be kind of like, I think it's always good to be truthful and honest, but I guess in the same breath, you've got to weigh whether or not your words are going to do the, more harm than good,
And then there's another side of that where through gradual exposure, a person can become stronger. And so if we are treating everyone like these precious little snowflakes, and we live in this little like Nerf reality where we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, that actually could end up creating a larger volcano down the line.
Yeah.
So another angle from that would be like, oh, you're doing him a favor by saying he's shit.
Yeah, well, yeah,
It's like a micro explosion.
Yeah.
It was like a little mini self-immolation. Like, like oh God, okay, repair.
Yeah, I've thought about that because I thought about the psychology of the person that would send me the message, "Don't quit your day job."
Yeah.
You know, about music. It's like it's a weird. They just don't see. It's probably like the perfect storm because again, it's like 9 out of 10 people. You know, like objectively, like I wouldn't put up something where I sounded bad, first of all. So there's that. It's like going back to what we started talking about initially, like I'm only putting up the clips where I think I sound good, you know.
In this present moment in reality.
In
but
this
in
present
5 years,
moment.
you'll probably feel differently.
True.
So that's always, it's like another kind of quandary that we're in. We're like, fuck, what is good?
Yeah. But yeah, I just think it's like people, it's that thing about being removed from the subject, you know, like when you, I think being a public figure and you know, you experience this, we've all, especially this year, experienced this, you know, whether it's seemingly posting about anything, you're bound to get like negative comments. It's so easy to get negative comments from people that, you know, and to leave a negative comment when you would never say the same thing to a person's face, you know? And so that, I think that's one of the other problems with social media is that there's like too much distance between you and the person that you're talking to, and it allows people to say things that they wouldn't ever otherwise say, you know, to your face.
Yeah.
There's like no accountability.
Yeah. But, and then I'm just playing devil's advocate just for the hell of it, but the way that trauma isn't a quantifiable, okay, cool, there was 16 grams of trauma in this incident, so that will be 16 grams to you, and to me it will all quantitatively affect in the same way.
Yeah.
That 16 grams of weighed out trauma could affect another person, one person. It could make them, they could be able to kind of transmute that, and it makes them super strong. And then another person, it can completely collapse them.
Yeah.
And then another person, it could, you know, and so, yeah, no, it's kind of a weird conversation of how to, just the way that like an organism interprets trauma in the first place. And like hearing a comment from somebody, essentially that would be, if it really penetrates, that would be invoking some type of like, essentially like probably early childhood trauma of some sort starts coming up.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, I'm not really saying anything right now. I just think it's interesting how we all interpret trauma in different ways.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't think that I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life. I'm like pretty privileged in that way, but I'm pretty sensitive to the suffering of others. And, you know.
Do you think it's possible to be sensitive to the suffering of others if you haven't experienced suffering yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably experienced suffering I've certainly experienced suffering over the past couple, like I guess what I meant to say was I haven't really experienced a lot, like I don't have a lot of childhood trauma. I had a pretty good upbringing, but I experienced trauma in like my relationships and of course in a major way with my mom, and my mom's illness, and my mom's, maybe, you know, I was able to, you know, vicariously experience trauma through my mom and my mom's relationships. Never sort of personally, you know, I was just very lucky with my own upbringing, but I think being around my mom, who suffered immensely, has kind of sensitized me. So it was like more vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
But
being lucky with trauma is a weird thing. Is it like, so middle-aged white men have the highest incidence of suicide, like by like a landfall. Like
middle-aged white men.
Middle-aged white men. So the people that are seemingly like the luckiest end up having the highest usage of antipsychotic medication and antidepressant, and end up, you know, having the highest likelihood of ending their lives. But meanwhile, they happen to be in this experience. It's like, oh, that's like, you're the lucky ones. And so there's like an interesting, I think, balance between like being lucky and that indicating that nothing really happened, and then the unlucky person that is gradually going through this essential like exposure therapy through their whole life. And then what you see with people that do grow up in like more urban environments or cities or whatnot, they end up being much better in military scenarios, for example, with detecting bombs in the street, whatever the term for that person that would do that would be. And so they can see things in the world that a person that grew up in like a more like what we might conceive as like lucky, that they just won't see. Which is, so it's just once again, I don't really have any question or anything. It's just an interesting thing, like I think an important thing for any person is to be able to come to a point of just resolve with their past and their history, whatever that may be. But as long as we're in a place where it's like we don't see how our history actually does serve us, and brought us to this point that we are today, then we have this kind of like weight of our past. But I feel like going through a process of getting to a point where it's all, you can just find kind of understanding of like, okay, that happened, this trauma happened, and that caused me to become stronger, and now here I am, versus the person that doesn't experience a lot. Sometimes I think that can lead to kind of like just a more explosive, what's the volcano called that builds up and then blows up, versus the one that slowly oozes?
Ooh, I don't know.
It's like strata. Do you guys know what it's called? Volcanoes? I'm actually not a volcano expert. Actually, no.
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 No volcano. Delilah? No. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, trauma definitely, it makes you strong. I know some people who have had trauma and they become like almost too calloused, so it's,
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to, I think, do the work to make sure that it's like, it's just, it's got to be a balance.
It's a perfect balance.
Yeah.
If you go too callous, then you become the capped up volcano, like literally.
And if you have like PTSD from your trauma, you got to find a way to deal with that. And thankfully now we have like a number of really interesting tools emerging to help people deal with PTSD, because that's a real thing too.
Yeah. I wonder, we'll wrap the thing up kind of soonish. But so as you were talking about training your voice, I wonder if you noticed any personality shifts or like outlook shifts as you cultivated your voice, because I think it's interesting. We're kind of, in a sense, continually like tuning our nervous system based off of the sounds that come out of our body.
Yeah.
And so if I'm the type of person that is kind of high-pitched voice and talks really fast and always feels kind of anxious, I'm literally reasserting that anxiousness into myself. And so I wonder if, as you cultivate your vocal cords, as you're like learning how to use your sound maker, do you feel like you notice any change in who you were as a person?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I'm actually very passionate about like vocal performance and vocal health, and how your voice is an expression of like who you are.
Whoa.
And how your voice changes when you're feeling more or less confident, and how changing your voice can actually make you feel, it's like there's like a reverse causality. Like your voice changes when you feel less confident. Maybe you speak more breathily, maybe your voice volume kind of diminishes, but you can actually like make yourself feel more confident just by learning how to speak better.
Yep.
And to like breathe properly from your diaphragm. The same way that we now know that, obviously you smile when you're happy and when you're projecting happiness, but just forcing yourself, voluntarily utilizing the muscles that are involved in smiling can actually change your mood for the better.
Yeah.
And
change your voice. You can hear people smiling through the phone.
Yeah. So I think like mastering your own voice, like your vocal apparatus, your larynx, like I think is a really important tool for people, or a practice for people. Learning how to breathe and speak from your diaphragm, crucially important. Knowing how to like, enunciate, intonate, to not be breathy. I think learning a little bit about the physiology of the larynx and like, I think that can be super useful. And then also ultimately just like, making friends with your voice and how you sound.
That's good.
Yeah. I've always wanted to be more of like a tenor when I sing, for example, but obviously I have a deep voice. And so I've like worked really hard to like expand my range, but I've also had to swallow the bitter pill that I'm probably never going to have the range that like, I'm never going to sound like Jeff Buckley, like in those like higher registers. But that's okay. Like, you have like, you literally, I mean, you just have to learn to master your instrument and to emote from from where you are. And that's really what's going to draw people to your voice, whether it's like public speaking or singing.
Yeah.
The same thing applies.
Yeah.
There was a great, I became kind of friendly with Josh Groban a couple years ago. And I remember like seeing an interview with him. I actually was not familiar with his music at all before I met him. And then I was like, oh, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And I mean, I love his music. He's so incredibly talented. But I remember reading like an interview with him where he was saying, and he's one of the most successful recording artists in the world, right? And his music might not be for everybody necessarily, but I remember reading an interview with him where he just came off so humbly, and I related to what he was saying. That he growing up, all he wanted to do was sound like Eddie Vedder. And if he would have just continually tried to be that type of vocalist, he probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere in his career. I think I'm like accurately portraying like the gist of what I got from that interview. But the minute he accepted like what his own voice actually sounded like and what he was actually meant to sing like, which is like this much bigger, more operatic, vocal style, that's when his career took off. And so I think it's a powerful lesson for all of us to just, to master your own instrument, to not try to sound like anybody else. And yeah, that applies to singing, but it also applies to like what we're putting out in the health and wellness world. It applies to like the content of our podcasts. It applies to everything really.
Yeah.
You've got to, do the work, discover, your voice and what that sounds like, and then just go all in and own it.
How does one start to action steps to doing that?
I think experimentation is important. Like always being willing to, like take risks and experiment. Be willing to sound like shit. Be willing to fail. And try to like look at the bright side. Like listen back to your talks or look at your content. Listen to your voice. And rather than always thinking critically about it, try to, crystallize in your mind, like envision what it is about it that you like, I might not like my voice when I get like super, super high, but I do like it. Like I do like the tone of my voice at certain, in certain registers. And so you can kind of like lean into that. Like you can be like, okay, well, how do I get that tone like at a higher register, or how do I like write songs where I'm able to emote, in that sort of like frequency? Because again, like being authentic is really what I think, magnetizes people to your voice or to your work or to your art or to whatever it is, being authentically you.
I think it's because people crave authenticity with themselves, and they don't necessarily always have the most seamless education on how to tap into that. And so when you stumble into somebody that seems like they're projecting something that's like, wow, that's just them.
Yeah.
It's less like, oh.
Yeah.
Everybody can kind of like let aside like, oh, okay, cool. Like there's like somebody that took the mask off, and that can kind of create this catalyst, which is kind of gets into, and we'll actually officially wrap up. But I think that a person in the modern age where a lot of people, at least in LA, it's like everybody's, a social media influencer, and they're all trying to build their thing, and I need to have a message that moves mountains, and I need to like make a difference. I think that ends up leading to a lot of what did you call it? You taught me a word recently. The Dunning-Kruger, what's it called? The
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger effect. There's a lot of Dunning and Kruger effect.
Dunning and Krugering.
Dunning and Krugering is going down out the wazoo.
Yeah.
With me, I'm a Dunning Kruger.
We all are.
Hardcore.
Yeah.
We were so Dunning Kruger essentially is you. The less you know about a thing, the more. I kind of read a couple different, but my sense of it is when you know a little bit about a thing, when you're reading like the elementary school version of the book, you have this idea that you know everything about it, and you get very outspoken. You have these opinions, and you deem yourself as an expert because you just don't realize the depth of the subject.
Yeah.
And
there is something good about that though, because it does take a certain level of naivete to to believe that your voice freaking matters.
Oh, that's true.
You know, there
Good
is a
point.
certain amount of like almost stupidity that that you need to be successful in something, to believe fully, you know, in your own head, that your voice matters and that you've got something unique to say. Because if you didn't, like, you would never, you know, like, if I didn't actually believe that, I never would have gotten started in health. And, you know, musicians, you know, like, there's already, like, you know, every love song has already been written, right? But a musician starting out, you know, they just believe that their perspective, their voice is going to be, you know, unique, and it's going to offer a new twist, a new angle from which to, like, view this thing that, you know, that others might think has already been looked at from every possible angle.
So Dunning-Kruger effect is almost like it's like a survival mechanism for people that actually don't have any business doing a thing to begin starting a thing. And then the people that are already well deep into it, that have already established themselves, they have deep roots, they're like, okay, I can pull back a little bit and just kind of like do my art, and, you know, I don't need to be proving any points.
Yeah.
You know, but when you first start with a thing, if everyone had the perception of, you're right, I don't actually really know anything, and there's people that are experts on this, so I should just shut up, I guess perhaps no one would ever really actually start anything, because we'd all kind of we'd start in that point.
Yeah, and that's also why, like,
so go Dunning-Kruger effect, everybody.
Yeah, go
Dunning-Kruger.
Have at it. Yeah, have at it.
All right, you got another person coming in right now, so we got to stop this thing.
Dude, this is so fun.
I enjoyed this experience.
Always a blast hanging with you. We always talk about something different too.
I know. We got to keep it flexible.
Yeah, I've got to get you back on mine.
Well, I'm down to do it.
The Genius Life.
People need to go to grab the book.
Grab the book, The Genius Life. Subscribe to my podcast, also called The Genius Life.
Convenient.
Yeah.
And then on the Instagram, you're Max Lugavere.
Max Lugavere, Lugavere. Yep.
Bango. Thanks for doing this.
I'm not on the gram shirtless as often as you are, but I hope to provide value in other ways.
Yeah. You use your mind. It's different.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. Over and out.